Hi everyone, thanks for joining me on Founders Friday. Today I'm going to be talking to Kanav Batra. Kanav is an engineer and entrepreneur who cares about using tech to make cities smarter and prepare for the challenges that lie ahead. Kanav is the founder of Envision Systems, a Melbourne-based IoT and AI startup that addresses the issue of urban transport congestion and enables strategic infrastructure planning by bridging the fundamental gap in data for governments and users. Envision Systems develop wireless AI sensors to capture data and insights directly from the source so authorities and users can know how sites are being utilized in real time. Thanks so much for joining me today, Kanav. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you, Joe. Lovely to be here with you, and thanks for the great introduction.
No problem. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we get started?
Yeah, I guess one of the main things is like with the impact of the world that we're living in right now and this coronavirus pandemic,
Definitely.
fundamentally what's been impacted is our relationship with cities and how people move about from A to B because we're not moving anymore. We're locked inside. So from our perspective of providing data about how people are using cities with AI, now is more important than ever to step up our work in terms of AI and helping everyone from a public health perspective. So good to be chatting with you about AI.
Yeah, this is really a really current topic. As you said, the cities have been affected massively by the COVID-19 situation, and I think emerging technologies like AI and IoT will be very influential in helping us transition back into normal life. So,
Yep.
if we'd like to start off, would you like to just talk a little bit about your company, the story of what led you to start Envision Systems? How did that come about, and how has the journey been for you so far?
Sure, absolutely. So Envision Systems as a properly incorporated company has been around for about 1 year now, but my journey in IoT and IoT's application in cities started quite a while ago. So back when I was at university as an engineer, I used to drive to university and I could never find parking
Yeah.
because it's such a mess finding parking, let alone at universities, but everywhere as well. So I was just kind of thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I knew where to park before I would actually get to university? You know, I'm sure there's sensors out there that can measure this thing quite easily. So that'd be kind of cool. Just give me an app and I'll do that. It turns out it is very doable, but no one was doing it at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Because of the challenges associated with funding and, you know, who's going to pay for it and everything. So I kind of took it upon myself with a buddy of mine to embark on that journey to say, do you know what? We're engineers. We can build an app. We can follow YouTube tutorials quite well. Let's have a crack. Let's try to build an app. And we found some data from the city of Melbourne. That's where I live.
Yeah.
About parking occupancy, and we built an app. And then we said, it'd be kind of good if we could scale this and, you know, maybe monetize a little bit of it because we put a lot of effort into it. And then we realized that data was quite a big problem when it came to cities. And there was a requirement from government and users that we'd love to know what the traffic is actually like at ground level. We'd love to know how the bicycle path is being used or how crowded the train is or the bus is. So this kind of started the journey for combining IoT with AI, making really powerful sensors that give you information that's actually usable from the source. And the journey kind of started there. And like 1 year ago, we incorporated a company specifically around providing data so that you could then build really good, useful applications on top of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. For sure, data is the key with a lot of these different technologies, and that is the thing that's driving this whole fourth industrial revolution forward. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
collecting data really is the key. Had you worked on any previous networks-based projects, something to do with IoT, before you kind of embarked on that journey?
Yeah, so my background is from a telecommunications company. So I used to work with Australia's largest telco company around the design of communication networks. So how do, phones talk to the internet, or large enterprises where they have data centers. but I had a long-standing interest in IoT. My thesis project was around developing wireless sensors as well. And what I kind of noticed as key was communication. You could capture all the data that you want. You could process all the data that you want, but if you aren't communicating it effectively between where it's generated and where it's used, and if you aren't communicating it in real time, that's really blocking a lot of the opportunity for the world. So,
Sure.
that's kind of our experience in networks, and that's why we're really bent strongly on providing real-time data, because it is doable and it's actually quite necessary.
Definitely. I mean, the fact that the data is real time is so key, because the data that's just out of date or not relevant is not going to be any good to anybody. That's really cool. So just to think about transport in a broader sense, what does transport really like mean to you? Is transport just a means from getting from A to B, or can transport mean a bit more than that?
Well, I think it means a bit more. I mean, we don't look at transport from the perspective of being a bit more on a daily basis, because we're so kind of busy with our own lives.
Absolutely.
But if you think about why we're traveling, right? I use the train to go to work. Earlier, I used the bus to go to university. And what I'm fundamentally using transport is to access opportunities.
Yes, definitely.
So
Yeah.
if that is not provided to me in the manner that suits me, it fundamentally restricts my access to opportunity. And that's what's actually tying us all together. It's enabling us to meet, your family and friends, go about university or work or whatever fulfills your ambitions. Transport is so key to our interaction with the city and what it provides. So from a high level, that's the purpose it provides. But from a low level of using it on a daily basis, we have an expectation for it to be quite streamlined and quite effective, especially if we're paying for every journey as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think transport is 100% more than just a method from getting from A to B, and it definitely opens up opportunity. And that is, if you think about it, that's the whole point of cities, isn't it? Is people live in a city because they want access to the opportunities. So if the transport systems aren't living up to that expectation, then what's the point, I guess?
Absolutely, yeah.
So have you been affected by COVID-19? I know that the restrictions were put in place, I think, quite early in Australia, but has that affected your day-to-day operations at all?
I guess, well, the fact that everyone is kind of working from home now, so we are kind of impacted by that we aren't able to see our colleagues or have meetings with customers or, just go out and about the way we were used to doing it. So it does kind of take that human element of interaction away. But being like a hardware and software company, and primarily a software company, our work hasn't been impacted so much. But from a well-being point of view, we do kind of look out for everybody being positive, because as humans, we are social animals. We are used to moving out and about. Yeah. So we do kind of ensure that everyone's taking time out for themselves and not just glued on to just working all the time as well, because in times like these, mental health is quite as important as just your actual health as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, mental health is so important to remember in these times. It's very easy to kind of get sucked into a routine where you might not be thinking positively all the time. So that's really, really important. Have you been working on any projects to do with like a web-based product? I think I saw something on your website about you been working on a web-based product for this situation.
Yeah. So one of the key things that we've kind of looked into is, in light of COVID-19, what can we do as a group of people and as a company to provide a valuable input into the world, right? What can we do to help the world's response?
Yeah.
And what we've started to do now is we've launched like a web-based product that measures the usage of cities across the world at a road and street level. We're currently doing this for all of London, Sydney, and the entire state of California. And that's specifically measuring how many cars, how many people are on the roads, and providing real-time traffic counts, but also providing real-time heat maps as well, so you can identify which are busier pockets. But our intent of doing this is to correlate this transport usage with like your local coronavirus case counts as well. So you have a health-based measure.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
fundamentally what we're trying to do is support governments and cities in measuring the impact of restrictions in real time, but also allow for the reopening of cities to be based on actual usage, because the last thing we want is for us to go back and then come back into restrictions.
absolutely, definitely.
So here data becomes that primary element of it being accurate, reliable, and it's actually enabling informed decision making.
Mm. Yeah, so that's very impressive that you're already operating in the whole of London and a couple of other cities as well. So what is your main source of data for those cities? Are you using your own sensors that you've put in the infrastructure?
Yeah, ideally, we rely on our sensors and our data feeds, primarily because we have a lot more control over them.
Yeah,
But otherwise, what we do is we're working with transport authorities all over the world as well to say, have you got any data that we can tap into?
yeah,
We'll apply our algorithms and analytics on top of that. And the good thing about the world is there's been over the past, I'd say 5 to 10 years, there's been a good push around digitization. So people do have data sets that are accessible or that can be requested. And it's up to the private market or the public market to then kind of analyze it. And that's where we're applying our machine learning and artificial intelligence techniques.
yeah, that's really cool. So are you using the data to mainly inform the public transport authorities on different metrics so that they can run their operations better, or are you directly trying to solve problems like traffic congestion and overcrowding in cities?
Yeah, good question, Joe.
Thanks.
So one of the key things is around transport. The key thing to understand, and we've had to kind of learn this as well, we can't physically restrict movement of people. People do have to go where they want to go, and they will be where they want to be at the time they need to be there. So the question, okay, so if we think about it from a problematic point of view, right, it's, if you consider it as a system, there's the system, which is the underlying services or your red lights or whatever. And then there's the elements around it, which is the number of cars, people and walking, everything. So we can't control the elements because people will drive when they want to drive, people will walk when they want to walk. But we can improve the underlying system. We can look into stuff like, can we provide more services when there are more people? Or can we provide a longer train with more cabins when there are more people? Or can we do something with traffic light timings, for example, so it's dynamic? When there's more cars and they've been waiting for a longer period of time, make the red light timing a bit shorter than the green one.
Definitely.
So the data that we're providing is really focused on unlocking those conversations to bring transport infrastructure into the modern age where it's powered by data.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, if we had smart traffic light systems and all of the different other ways that you could improve public transport through the use of data, I'm sure that would make the whole process a lot more efficient. So it's really interesting to hear that it's not just about counting the number of cars or counting the number of people on trains. It's actually about the direction that the cars are moving and the flow of transport through the city. Yeah. So it's a lot more complex than just numbers of people and stuff.
Yeah, and the question is like, you can capture all this data, but what do you do with it, right?
Yeah.
Information is quite valuable because it serves as the basis for analytics and insights, but analytics and insights are what actually enable change. So it's quite crucial to look at that data from that perspective and then say, okay, we've got this. Can this be implemented into the current system in a doable manner? Or is this too far of a target that it can't be achieved realistically? Because there's too many moving parts, right?
Yeah.
You'll have a technology provider, you'll have government. Traffic lights have been around for 30, 40 years. They may be running on like old electricity lines and not have anything to do with internet or data. So how do we bring the conversation forward? And that's the challenge of this industry. That the good thing is, I think it's getting there. There's a big momentum around autonomous cars, forcing infrastructure to become a bit better as well. And infrastructure kind of looking at what can we do in terms of citizen services better. So the shift has started. And it'll be one of those projects which takes time, but in the end, it provides a really valuable result.
Yeah. How have you found government's responses to your systems, have they been quite receptive, or have they been a little bit resistant to change? Because not everyone is as open to change as people like you and me, I expect.
Well, I like, I mean that may be like one of the beliefs that, government is too slow to work or things like that. But from what we've seen, that they're quite receptive of, technology being an enabler. If you think about transport, be it like any kind of government representative or anyone, they take the same train as I do or as you do, right?
Very
So
good
they
point.
have the same frustration. They know that if it's not working, it's not working for everyone. It doesn't give them like some kind of business class train ticket or something. So
Very true.
the problem is quite prevalent, and they are quite receptive of technology because where we are, technology is now at a mature stage. We're not just seeing it as a proof of concept of something in the wild. That was cool. We can't do that over here. It's too risky.
Yeah.
It's now like, that was cool. We see it working. What is the systematic way that we can implement it over here? What's the process look like? And once that process is defined, the path to implement technology within the government landscape becomes quite doable. It's just a matter of ensuring that it's being done the right way. You're not compromising on things such as security and privacy. Because when you work with government, there's an obligation to do the right thing by citizens.
Yeah.
And those are the things that, companies like us in this day and age need to be willing to have. Those are the conversations you need to have. You have to be a privacy and security first company. And governments
Definitely.
are kind of realizing that as well. That, this is valuable technology, but the way it's implemented has to be in this kind of way so that we're not compromising anything.
I agree. Privacy is huge, especially in the 21st century with different, social media scandals around privacy and all the rest of it. You definitely want to try and stay safe with that on that front as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So if we just talk a little bit more about your systems and networks, and what do you use to run? Do you use 4G, or are you starting to look at 5G as a potential option for running your systems?
Yeah. So the good thing about our kind of technology is we like to tap into any kind of communication network that's available.
Yeah.
So we've designed our technology to be highly compliant. So we will give one wireless AI sensor that can either use your Wi-Fi if it's there, Bluetooth if it's there. Most places we kind of rely on your 4G LTEs.
Yeah.
The advent of 5G is that it's starting to roll out now.
Yeah.
It's
Still
gone
in
from
early
that.
stages.
Yeah, I mean, the technology's been kind of cooking for a long time. People have been building it for a long time, testing it for a long time. Well, with any kind of new mobile spectrum, there's a lot of standards to be defined. So that's been happening for about 2 to 3 years quite extensively.
Right.
And now is the time that it's actually being put out, the little cells are being put out. So we would definitely looking to tap into that because as a company who wants to provide real-time data, low
Yeah.
latency is
Yeah.
kind of key. And we'd be very interested to explore the use of that for our technology and what benefits it can derive for our customers and the end users of transport systems as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What sort of benefits would you see that having for your clients and the governments specifically? Do you think it would greatly improve the speed of your data transfer and all the rest of your systems?
Yeah. So if you think about like mission critical applications, in the event of safety, so an accident happens, unfortunately, somewhere on the road or somewhere on a train or tube network, a device needs to pick it up or somebody needs to inform. Ideally, it would be a device that picks it up that this has happened and it's sending communication directly to the transport authorities that this has happened. You need to close off this block and you need to send in an ambulance or you need to do something to respond to that quite effectively. And in that particular setting, you can't have network congestion, you can't have network latency. And those applications are where it's absolutely critical. And just from an operations point of view as well, I do believe it can provide a lot of good value on a long-term sustained basis where you can have data coming in, being analyzed straight away, and you're pushing out changes dynamically as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think 5G has a whole load of really exciting potential use cases. That's one of the things that definitely is exciting on the horizon, in my opinion. And
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's
go on.
like it's on the paper, it looks great, and I'm sure it's being tested quite well as well. But what I'm kind of really excited about is there is a willingness to pilot it and actually see it for what it's worth. And I think that's kind of key to new technology. You should put it out there, test it, and actually decide its uses on its merits. And that's what I noticed that's happening quite well with 5G, that, let's put it out there, let's do a pilot, and let's see what it looks like.
Definitely, yeah. I think despite all of the people who are quite critical of 5G, there's a lot of people who doubt the technology. They're quite skeptical about the technology, and but then again, I don't think that's new with 5G. There's always been people who are critics of the different communications technologies. But yeah, as you said, as long as we do thorough testing and implement it slowly to make sure that everything's working as planned, then I don't think there'll be any problems with that. So with the combination of IoT, AI, and then hopefully 5G a little bit further down the line, do you think that the total eradication of city congestion is possible? Do you think that's something that you would be aiming for as a company, to try and assist the eradication of traffic congestion and stuff like that?
Well, that'd be a very ideal state to be in, wouldn't it? Where
Absolutely.
you have
Yeah,
the concept of congestion is a thing of the past. That's definitely what we'd love to strive towards. But like I said, I think a reasonable step forward and a measured step forward is to kind of look at, can we just improve it in terms of the infrastructure being smarter? If currently red lights are designed as such that no matter what, a car needs to stand there for at least 30 seconds when it's red, even when the rest of the road's empty, that just makes no sense to me.
No.
You could just detect it, and without even using like a transmission network, locally you could just say, if there's only one car on the road, you don't have to wait that long, as long as it's safe to go by. When there is congestion, you could optimize for the flow of traffic. There's more traffic from north to south and less from east to west. Maybe prioritize that. Okay. So you get the network layer effect being a little bit better. So those are the improvements that you'd look to derive. But at a whole citywide level, even those itself, though they might appear small, they're going to have an order of a magnitude difference in the way cities operate. And eventually you want to work towards, hyper optimization, where you look at every intersection as a node and you just want to optimize that, but you don't want to compromise what's happening at the macro level as well. Mm-hmm. So I think what's key over here is a lot of IoT, sensors being good at perception, AI, the compute being smart, and it actually computing the right thing based on its models, it predicting what's going to happen to the traffic accurately. And those are the two key pillars of actually making smart infrastructure. 5G just serves as that communication highway that if you're doing analytics and compute somewhere else, you're able to transmit that information back faster. If you're doing it locally on the edge, well, you don't need a fast communication link because it's happening directly on the device or the traffic light, for example.
Sure. So if you don't mind, would you like to just explain a little bit more about what you mean by on the edge for anyone who might not be aware of that term?
Sure. So edge compute is basically looking at if you can compute things where they are likely to be used locally. So if I have a sensor, right, mm-hmm. and it is sensing the number of cars, to take a transport example again. So if it's sensing the number of cars and it has to just count them. So if it's, okay, let's do this. If it's an image-based sensor and it's asked to count the number of cars, it will take in a video stream. It would then process that video stream somewhere. What happens in the cloud is that video stream comes in, goes to a cloud, and then the number of cars are counted, and it's reported back somewhere. What happens on the edge is the video stream comes in, there is a compute capability available on the device itself. And it just says, yep, I can see the cars locally here, I can calculate that here, and then it sends the information. So that is quite effective in actually saving transmission costs in terms of like bandwidth. You're not using that much data.
Absolutely.
But you're actually computing decisions quite faster as well because it happens right there in real time on the device.
Yeah, that's great for speeding up the connection speed and getting that bandwidth cost down as well. That's
Yeah.
really, really important. And with the growth of another technology like autonomous driving, hopefully that's going to start to be a bit more widely used in cities over the next decade. And do you
Yep.
think that technologies like your sensors and your IoT networks are going to be used to try and help those autonomous cars navigate their ways around cities?
Yeah. Autonomous cars are quite interesting from a technology standpoint, in terms of where they are. So one of the key things to kind of look at it is there's a lot of hype, if I may use the word, around
Yeah,
autonomous cars.
yeah,
But then you also have to realize there are two different technological approaches to autonomous cars as well. One is where cars compute everything on the device quite locally. And this is just from what I've seen and from my understanding, so I may be wrong over here.
sure, sure.
It's like Teslas of the world, where they have all the compute locally within the car.
Yeah,
Then there are other car companies and automakers that are looking into vehicle to infrastructure communication or vehicle to everything communication, where they are kind of looking at, a car talking to a smart pole and telling it what's around it.
okay.
So I'm not too sure of which way autonomous cars are going to be built or which is the actual method that they will use to compute. What I kind of see as quite interesting is you will always have a transition period when it comes to the concept of autonomous cars. Some people will have them, some won't have them. Some will
Yeah,
still be on bicycles, right? Because people like to ride bikes. People might still be walking as well. So in terms of the city being used, we see our technology is still being quite effective because the systems that govern, like traffic lights, everybody says they'll be removed when autonomous cars are here. Well, the question is, okay, well, how do people cross the street then? Do they wait for an empty thing? Or is there like an underpass? Is that transition actually going to happen? If it happens, in what time frame is that going to happen? And there will still be an onus on transport departments across the world to look at how transport is used, because public transport will still be there, normal transport, private transport will still be there on the same road. So our technology we see as being quite crucial to providing information about how the system is still being used and how it can be optimized further. Autonomous cars is one part of the puzzle as we see it.
yeah. That's definitely going to be important to use technologies like IoT to assist the transition into an autonomous world where autonomous cars are a bit more commonplace. I think
Yep.
the transition period could be difficult, and maybe I think once there's a bit more autonomous cars than there are human-driven cars, then I think it'll start to get easier. But hopefully, companies like you will make that transition easier. I'm sure they will. So I think we're going to call it a day there. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really, really good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's been lovely to chat as well. And thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.